Congressman Mike Johnson.
The Bossier School Board gets a letter from several organizations, anti-religion groups. The ACLU may chime in, saying that their policy requiring students to stand for the national anthem is illegal and unconstitutional. Gave them like 5 days to change the policy. School board bows up and says, nah, not going to happen. Legal fight on the way, Mike? I know you've done a lot of legal work on this area.
Well, I have, and, in my previous practice, I did religious liberty litigation, and these same groups have been picking on the Bossier Schools for a long time. I've represented them several times over the years, and we've never lost a case in Bossier because they follow the law. They respect the rights of all students. At the same time, they're not going to bend over and bow to the whims of these atheist, radical, secularist groups, and that's who's picking on them once again. Look, these groups are on a search and destroy mission for all things religious and now, by extension, all things patriotic. And they pick on Bossier because they know it's a very conservative area of the country, and the people there are all those things. They are patriotic, and they deeply revere our religious heritage in this country. So, the board is I think doing the right thing. They're going to make a statement that they certainly respect the dignity of all students and their fundamental freedoms. At the same time, we don't have to sacrifice who we are as Americans. And there's a compromise and a middle ground to find there, and I believe we can find it in Bossier.
There's a confusion about that the cases that were cited by these groups pertain to classroom activities and not extracurricular activities like the football games. What's the distinction there? Is there a definition by the Supreme Court on, distinguishing those two?
It depends on who you ask, right? There's no case directly on point with regard to the distinction between an extracurricular after-school activity, for example, and classroom activity. And the real motivation, I think, in Bossier is that they want to. There are certain standards that you have to meet to participate in extracurricular activities, and they've never implied or said that they're going to force any student to say the Pledge of Allegiance or sing the national anthem, but that there ought to be a certain level of dignity and decorum about student activities and student events. And some of this is really is gray area and untested questions in the courts. And I think Bossier is willing to take that stand, pun intended, and test it if that's what it comes to.
Looking at the list of groups that have targeted Bossier Parish, the Center for Inquiry, it's the usual suspects: American Humanist Association, Freedom from Religion Foundation. Last week we had the ACLU of Louisiana folks on, and it isn't part of, I'll say, problem. And the strength that these groups have gained is that so many school districts, etc., have rolled over in the face of their threats. And,
Robert,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's exactly right. Yeah, no, that's exactly the problem. That's the reason we've lost so many of our fundamental freedoms over the years. We lost so many without even having a battle. We just conceded the ground, and that's a great tragedy. And so what we did in my religious liberty defense work over the last 19 years, is we would run in when they got a demand letter, a school district or a city council somewhere, a county board of supervisors. They get these radical demands from these groups, and they just fold the tents and give in, and that's a tragedy. So every time we would go and draw the line, we used to defend all these places for free. I did pro bono legal work just to allow them the opportunity to fight. And we won over 90% of the cases. We won. The idea is the truth can still prevail, but we have to have the strength and the courage to take a stand and defend it. And that's what Bossier's done well. The last time there was a dust-up was about a year and a half ago, I think. Everybody may remember when Airline High School was threatened because they had a prayer request box that some student group put in the hallway, and they had an FCA club, Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And the ACLU bowed up and made all these threats and intimidations, and they picked on the wrong Marines in Bossier Parish or the wrong airmen, I might say, Barksdale, because we had a rally out there in the parking lot. 4,000 people showed up, and I fired back a letter to the ACLU, and they went away.
Yeah,
because they realized they were not on solid legal ground, and we would fight, and that's what it takes sometimes. Legal
nuts and bolts on this. What has to happen now? Will the ACLU have to go out and find a plaintiff? Can they sue on the behalf of these anti-religious groups? Give me kind of a heads up on what we can expect now.
The mechanics of it is exactly right. They have to have a standing, as we say in the courts, in order to bring a lawsuit. They have to have a plaintiff, someone locally who's actually harmed or offended, supposedly, by these ideas or policies, and that would be the trigger to get them in the court. You know, they've not been very successful recruiting plaintiffs around here because most people around here live by common sense and they understand that this is who we are as Americans, and it's not something that needs to be challenged and changed. And just because someone claims to be offended, the Constitution does not give us a right not to be offended. You know, we have to remind people of that all the time. The price of free speech is sometimes you have to be exposed to ideas and thoughts that you may not necessarily agree with, but that's part of the beauty of America. You know?
Congressman Mike Johnson, I can't thank you enough for your time. Appreciate it so much, sir.
Thank you all.